Good morning, everyone. I am Todd Obert, President and CEO of Productive Corporation, joined here alongside me, wearing his goggles, his safety cap, and his stethoscope, Mr. Pete Greco. He is going to talk today about how, if your network is secure, how in the world could data leak out of it and into his beaker. It is going to be fast and furious. If you have been to our events in the past, you know how we do it. We spend a little bit of time talking about productive, but most of the time we spend talking about real relevant content. That's what we're going to do today. A lot of stuff is happening in the world of security. Even though we have probably more layers of security, some would say we're as vulnerable as ever. And we want to talk a little bit about the mid-market and data, and specifically how data leaks out of environments, even with a decent security in place. Just to kind of give you a perspective that you may or may not have seen. And really, we see this out in environments, more often than we'd like to say, or more often than we'd like, I guess, because we know that makes our customers vulnerable, and we are not about that. We're about making them secure. So with that, we're going to meet Productive in 1 minute. We're going to talk about what we see in the mid-market, and we're going to talk about the evolution of employee data, and finally, what can be done to stay at the top of the best practice stack. Once again, if you have questions, please utilize the chat feature, and we'll get your questions answered straight away. So with that, let's meet Productive Corporation. Well, who is Productive? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because Productive provides security and storage software and services for mid-sized companies. We have a dedicated staff that can help you with pre-sales, IT implementation, assistance, configuration, help give you that knowledge that is hard to find out on that World Wide Web. We also implement, test, and optimize all the products we sell. In addition to that, we do security assessments, penetration tests, vulnerability assessments. We implement and optimize endpoint configuration assistance for UTM and gateway products. We also produce a lot of relevant content like we are putting on today. It's on productivecorp.com/content, as well as Productive Content, which is our YouTube channel. All of this is designed to help you. The bottom line is we have the resources to help you, whether it's implementation, assessment, licensing, optimization services. We are here to help. Help at productivecorp.com. That comes to all of us. We make sure that we bring our resources to bear to put you in the best possible position for success. That's what we do. And today, this is why we're putting this on. We have been doing this for a lot of years. We've been out to tons of customer sites. Pete Greco himself has dealt with thousands and thousands of customers and their security issues and their security postures. He's really seen a lot of it, and that's where it came, and that's where a lot of this stuff comes from for our knowledge series. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about it, and quite, honestly, this is for you guys. So if you have feedback, you have content, let us know. But for now, let's turn the virtual microphone over to our VP of Sales and Technology, the man behind the man with the plan, Mr. Pete Greco. Pete?
All right. Thanks so much, and thanks everybody for hopping on with us today. Really appreciate your time. I'm going to get right into it. Are going to make it quick, and hopefully we're going to make it informative for you as well. So, right, what are we talking about today? We're talking about the things that is miffing our clients, right? And part of the thing that we hear as we're talking to folks, or folks are calling us and telling us stories like, we have someone who's left the organization, we think that they've taken a client list, we think that they've taken documents pertaining to a legal case. We think they have some of our data that we wish they didn't have, right? And at this point, it's too late for us to do anything other than recommend legal action, right? We're not the type that's going to drive out to someone's house and break in and get your data back for you, right? So once it's been taken, you're really trying to get them to hand it back over voluntarily. And one of the biggest challenges for organizations is not knowing if it's actually occurred. We suspect that it's happened, but we really have no way of knowing. Right, so as we're talking to folks about security in a proactive way, right, some of the things that we hear a lot of is, well, we're doing data leak prevention in our email policy or with our anti-spam program. We're scanning for certain kinds of documents or credit card data or socials or this kind of stuff with our web content filter, right? And so those are a couple of areas where you absolutely need to be paying attention, but that's not the end of the story. One of the biggest things that we hear is we trust our employees, right? And a trustworthy employee is absolutely trustworthy until they're not, right? And sometimes things happen that cause an employee to act counter to the way that you want them to, and it's maybe their perceived treatment by the organization, maybe it's something going on in their personal life or whatever, and so waiting to put a trusted employee in the untrusted category until it's too late frequently means it's too late, right? And then back to point number one, we're taking care of the stuff that's coming in and out over the wire, right? But that's not the only way that data is getting transmitted, and we're certainly not protecting all the places where data may reside, right? So let's back up a second. We talked a little bit about trusted employees and untrusted employees, and your bigger challenge is, not whether an employee is trusted or untrusted. It's really getting your mind around what folks are trying to do. And your problem is not the guy or the gal who is not working hard, right? The person who is showing up late, taking the long lunch, and leaving early, and barely getting their job done. That's potentially the person you worry about the least, because they're not going above and beyond. Where we start really needing to pay attention and open our eyes is with that person who's actually working 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week. They're in the trusted employee category because they're really trying to kill it for the organization, right? But part of the way that they do that is they're getting the office connected to their phone. They're getting the office connected to their tablet. They're always ready to respond. Right? They're doing a lot of work from home. They're maybe doing a lot of work while they're on vacation, while they're at the hotel, while they're at the airport, and they want to make sure that they can always do a great job of doing their job no matter where they're at, right? And so some of the easy ways where we start seeing some data proliferation now, right, is I've got this on an encrypted server. So you've said this kind of data are price books, are proprietary plans, are plans to acquire our key competitor or acquire a vendor who's really going to make us more competitive by bringing them in-house, whatever it might be, right? You're putting that in a protected file share. You're encrypting that. Now, I want to review these docs while I'm on the airplane, so I move them from my encrypted file share to my local machine, right? Maybe from there I kind of figure out, well, I have a big laptop, so it's not really easy to use on the airplane. So I'm going to put it up onto my Office 365 OneDrive. Maybe that's my personal drive. Maybe that's my corporate drive, right? I've moved it to there. I've moved it to my USB drive so I can use my netbook that I like to use on the airplane, or I'm accessing it from my iPad or my Galaxy tablet or whatever it is, and now I have that protected confidential data still in my encrypted file share. It's protected there, but I also have it in maybe 2 or 3 or or even 4 or 5 other locations that IT may not have visibility into, and the employee may not be thinking, okay, I've done my work, now I need to delete this so that it only resides in the master location. And this is where we even see, just at the base level, with our folks, hey, I'm looking at 2 different documents, I've changed one, now I don't know which one's my master because I have it in 2 or 3 different locations. How did that happen? Well, I moved it from here to here, and then I saved it to my desktop so I could find it easily, and then I did this, and then I did that. And next thing we know, we're really having to drill in and look at the details of the file to figure out which is the most recently edited document so that they can continue on their day. That kind of stuff, Pete, is, yeah.
So is this exacerbated by, like, there's a lot of BYOD, and somebody, they can still get access to that, it's a VPN in, but they grab the file, but they might be somewhere that it's going to be spotty internet, so then they download it locally, right? And then they work on it, and they might upload a version of it, or they do a save as, but they still have that, document that shouldn't be on their own device that is actually unprotected, right?
It's still there, yeah. I got it on my personal device outside of the office, right?
Yep.
And then instead of moving it from my device back to the master location, I copy it.
Yeah.
Now I've got 2, right? And it's pretty subtle, Todd. And the way that a lot of organizations are going, and this is the way that our organization has gone, right, is we're not dependent on VPN anymore to be able to work from outside of the office, right? And so we're an O365 shop here, talking to tons of customers, and truly, the reason that we really started getting serious about Office 365 is not because of the other small businesses like us that were doing it, but when I started talking to some of our clients that had 500 employees or 1,000 employees who were doing it and telling me about how much sense it made, I was like, oh man, if you guys feel like it's expensive to have an Exchange administrator and maintain Exchange, I better be paying attention to this. And this is something that we should start thinking about. And so now we have OneDrive, right? And a lot of our folks are using Dropbox, right? We're not a Salesforce shop here, but our CRM is in the cloud. So now I'm potentially attaching documents that could be sensitive to our CRM that resides elsewhere, right? And doing a lot of stuff. And I might be doing my job from home or a remote location or whatever. And again, doing good work, doing the stuff that gets my boss to say, hey, Pete, great job making that deadline, right? And what he's not thinking about and what I'm not thinking about is how I'm exposing the organization, right? And then the next step here is that employee goes on to the next place. They've got price books. They've got customer lists. Was actually just talking to a sales rep, not with our organization, but who was very blatantly sharing with me how he's taken his client list from his last 3 positions. It's like, oh, okay, well, what I'm actually hearing is that you're a thief. That's what's going on, and I bet your previous employer doesn't think that it's great that you're now talking to their clients who they paid you to go out and acquire about a competitive solution, right? That's going to cost them money in the long run. And at the time, I'm sure he was very valuable and very trusted, and now has gone on to be a major headache for some of those previous folks, right? So data is proliferating. It's getting everywhere, and being able to just stop it right here is not getting us there, right? And so again, it's not just the untrusted employee, and it's not just the we don't want to appear to be Big Brother. Right? We want our people to know that we believe in them as an organization, and this may be getting handed down from the business side or the executive suite, not from IT, who's saying, hey, we love our folks. You folks are the reason that we got here. And that is very true, but not really understanding what we need to do to continue to protect the data. Right? And then we also have internal and external bad actors. So again, you've got that employee who's doing it the right way, right? They're working hard, they're accessing data or have access to the data, but they're not removing it from that encrypted file share. They're not uploading stuff that shouldn't go to Google Apps or Office 365 or Dropbox or whatever it might be. They're not doing that stuff, right? They're simply working hard, but now they get one of these neat emails, and let me just drag this over, right? You get one of these neat emails like I've got. Look how many emails here I got from Capital One 360. And I actually have a Capital One 360 account. So this is maybe something that I want to pay attention to. But the thing that I know is I don't use my corporate email address for my 360. I also know this is not how they send emails. Does your typical employee? Maybe. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. So maybe I want to see what's going on inside of here, and I've done my due diligence. I've run a Malwarebytes scan on this attachment. Nothing has happened. I've run a endpoint security scan on this attachment. Nothing has been found, so I must be safe to open this, right? Part of the challenge here, right, is a lot of times your malware detection is not going to get triggered until the threat is done running, until you've already been exploited. Tons of threats are not going to trip up your endpoint product. So now I'm getting a backdoor dropper onto your machine, right? It's sending me some command and control code that's sneaking through your firewall. And now I'm able to start figuring out what vulnerabilities exist here. Are you using Office 2010? Well, let's launch some Office 2010 vulnerabilities that you haven't patched against. And now I'm exfilling your data right through your firewall, and now I can go sell it on the open market, right? So now this is not a situation where an employee has been a bad actor. They've just simply been compromised, and there hasn't been enough protection to alert us that we have not a virus happening, but bad actors.
Well, yeah, they're clicking on they're clicking on their Gmail account, checking out their credit card statement, or they see something saying Capital One, your Capital One 360 account needs some verification, and they're like, oh, what's going on with that? They click on it, boom,
yeah,
it's done, right?
But let's take a look at the Career Builder case, right? Sending compromised resumes through jobs advertised on Career Builders. Yep. HR people and hiring managers are the targets. This is a part of their job to be looking at these resumes. You open up this resume, and inside is a candidate that is an exact match for your job description. Now, while you're reading this thing, you are getting compromised, but then your next move, and this is what we do too, right? When we're hiring, I see someone who looks really good. I flick it right over to Todd to let him take a look. Hey, man, look, we're on track here. We got a great candidate. Now we're both compromised, right? We send it to one other guy. Now we got 3 people that are compromised. Todd's an admin on the network, so that hack worked perfectly. You've gained access to an admin machine. Now we're going to be able to really begin the process of owning the network, right? So part of the way that we get on top of this stuff, right, is data retention. Let's get rid of that old stuff. If you have less stuff to exfil, you're giving less information to be used against you, right? And that bank statement from 1999, it's not useful to you anymore, but guess what? If you still have that same corporate bank account, very useful to a hacker, right? That price book from 2001, this can give strategy and give insight into the way that you do things. It's not useful to you anymore, right? But it can be useful information to a hacker. Old employee data for folks that haven't worked for you for 5 years, well, now we're doing some identity theft, right? Very useful information to a hacker, maybe not useful information to your organization, right? Getting rid of data, we've actually seen some instances where guys have run some undelete programs looking for data that has been removed. So how do we handle that? How do we handle data in motion? How do we handle BYOD? And that's one of the biggest challenges that we're helping folks overcome. Is I've got people bringing in their own devices, their tablets. We're not set up to handle this, but management is encouraging it because they want people to be able to do the work the way they want to be able to do it, right? And so now we're provisioning email, we're provisioning access on a device that we don't control, and anytime that employee is getting compromised or running into an issue, we might not have any visibility on what's going on, but we've given them a link right into the organization, right? And that's creating a headache for us. And so these are just some of the areas where we see the mid-market really challenged. And not because folks don't care. You know, I think the one thing that I would never say about the customers that we work with, right? There's some guys out there probably, but with the folks that we're involved with, it's really great folks with limited resources, limited headcount, doing fantastic jobs, keeping the enterprise afloat, and not as much time to really get focused in some of these other areas, right? And so that's where we want to come back in and really think about what are the right things, how can we help you, right? So we're doing a good job on the firewall. It's not that we never talk to folks who aren't doing anything. We do, but for the most part, we're talking to folks that they've got a pretty good policy at the gateway, right? Maybe they haven't been encrypting forever, but they really are starting to get serious about encrypting those mobile devices, right? And encrypting file shares, key file shares at least, on the file servers, and really paying attention to how do we lock down this data. Still have lots of opportunities though, and we might be encrypting that endpoint, but maybe we're not encrypting that mobile device, or don't have any visibility on that mobile device. And then the big area where we're really exposed is protecting our cloud services, or really relying on the cloud service provider to provide that protection. And you know, folks like Microsoft and Salesforce and Amazon are doing everything they can, right? Is it enough? How do you know, right? And what about some of these new cloud providers that are popping up, right? We use a cloud provider for our vacation tracking system. We use a cloud provider for our applicant tracking system. What kind of security are these guys doing? We really don't have a ton of visibility into what they're doing. And we say this all the time, and it's really true, right? You have to get lucky 100% of the time in your protection. The hackers only have to find that vulnerable spot that's open for 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, right? And if you're doing something with like an APT where it's just constantly hitting you, all they need is that 10-second window to get in there and start compromising the organization, right? So creates a lot of challenges for us, of course, to continue to bring our A game and stay on top of stuff. Where are we not? There we go. And so how do you get started? Whoop. Now we're giving away some secrets here. Let's go back a little bit. Come on, we got just a little bit of a. There we go.
Right, so, time.
Yeah. You know, so right, it starts with having an appropriate amount of budget, and the biggest area where we see folks going wrong is really just throwing out, hey, we want to get MDM. It's going to cost, you know, $3,000 or $8,000 or whatever the price tag is for the organization. You really got to put some muscle behind it, put some research behind it. This is absolutely something that we can help out with. Tons and tons and tons of information available on the internet to help you actually put together the business case on why we need to be thinking about doing this, and how critical it is, and how this criticality extends into the executive suite. All right, past webinar here just last week talking about, or I guess it was a couple weeks ago, talking about sometimes our executives are our biggest liabilities. These are the folks that are saying, hey, I don't want any kind of protections that's going to slow me down, but they're the key targets and the best conduit into the environment, right? So we got to start putting together those proposals and really be strategic and well thought out about what we're doing. One of the ways to really build a case for upping your security level is by taking advantage of a third-party assessment, internal assessment, and a penetration test to be able to get some visibility right, and figure out where your blind spots are in your environment. So we've got some ports that are wide open. We've got some information that's kind of available from the internet that we didn't know was available. We're missing a lot of patches. We've got a lot of generic or blank passwords. We've got some hotspots that are very penetrable, right? All this kind of stuff that's putting us into a situation where we think we've got it configured, or we didn't realize that our configuration has gotten out into a variance mode, and now we're not seeing where our openings are. So that kind of report can help you start creating a plan and have a presentation to go to management and say, this is where we maybe need some additional headcount, this is where we need some additional kind of help, or these are the kind of tools that we need to add to the environment so that we can make sure that we're doing our due diligence in keeping us not only up, but also safe, right? And then probably not lastly, but the last bullet point here, data discovery, right? And this is the thing that I think we freely admit, and I think a lot of our clients are freely admitting, is we know we got a lot of sensitive data out there. We know that this data has proliferated. We have done all of these things to get control over it, but what we still are not entirely sure is, where is all of this data? How do we go about figuring out this one document is in 5 or 6 or 100 different places so that we can start getting control over it, get it into our protected areas, and keep it rolling, right? And so one of the biggest things that we see, especially as we get into the smaller organizations, and I'll say the small mid-size, right, is we're not a Target, right? We're not Home Depot. We're not Target Corporation. We're not Walmart. We're not one of these big guys that you see in the news. And so here's a great story about an organization. Now, these guys actually were just on 60 Minutes, but the actual incident happened so long ago. If you Google this, aside from the 60 Minutes coverage, you're not going to find the news about where American Superconductor took a major hit in the gut when they were hacked by somebody out of Austria who gave their critical and expensive R&D to a Chinese organization who now has released part of their software on their wind turbines at, I'm sure, a much cheaper cost than what it cost American Superconductor to develop that information. 2/3 of their staff laid off, major gut punch to the revenue, right? And so basically what they've done is they've developed wind turbines for their competitor to come in and do at a cut rate. Right? And this kind of stuff is happening all the time. But when you start seeing a 100-man company who's not necessarily going bankrupt, but maybe they are, right? But they're seeing their sales reduced by 30% or 40%, and they're doing layoffs, but those layoffs are 30 or 40 or 50 people. To those people, it's a big news story, but 60 Minutes is not going to pick that up. You're not going to see that in the Wall Street Journal. You're not going to see it in the Washington Post, right? And it's not that it's not critical. It's certainly not that it's not happening. It's just that if it bleeds, it leads, right? And that's not a big enough news story to get viewers to go to their site. So this stuff is happening. It's not making the news. You may not make the news either, but you could be the victim of a layoff, a pay cut, right? A lot of headaches from this kind of stuff happening to you. So some of the ways that we can help you up your game, right, is with those assessments, with those penetration tests, with real conversations about what are you currently doing, what else can you do, how do we help you get there in a way that makes sense for your organization, right? Not all organizations are the same, and in a way that makes sense for your budget, because obviously everybody's got a finite amount of money that they can spend, and we can definitely help you start thinking about what is the right way to do it. It's not going 100% in any one category. How do we get you to 50% across the board? Then we can start figuring out how do we get to 55%, how do we get to 65%, how do we get to 80%, and keep everything rolling.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a good point, Pete. It doesn't just happen. It's not just flip the switch. and it's done, right? I mean,
Exactly.
it's an iterative process. You look at what you get, right? You test and refine. You look at your security posture. You look at what's valuable, what's not as valuable, and really continue to think about, to go back and refine that posture, because something that was secure a year ago or 2 years ago might be totally wide open now, not because you've changed, but because the way your workers have changed the way they work. So
yeah, when I first got into Productive Corporation here, Todd, one of the things, and I wish I could remember who said this, and I think they were referring to patch management at the time, but they said, if your network is constantly changing, you need to be on top of it because you don't know what's going on. If your network never changes, you need to be on top of it because you are continuously getting more and more vulnerable and more exposed, right? So there is no win. You're either always changing, you're not changing at all. Either way, you're going to become more and more insecure if you're not staying on top of it.
Absolutely. So fantastic presentation. Really appreciate it, Pete. That was good stuff. And for everybody attended, thank you very much. I hope you guys found this valuable. I think it gives you some stuff to think about. We're the first to admit there's no silver bullet. There's no one thing you can do. There are multiple things you can do, and and I would say, you take a look at this thing, everything from SIM down to additional endpoint, down to assessment tools, and even really solid DLP technology help further you along that continuum. From our side, let us know what we can do. Happy to chat with you about, happy to have you talk to one of our pro services guys and even get some perspective. And that's what Pete and his team can do to help facilitate those conversations. But for now, we've kept you long enough. I am Todd Obert along with Pete Greco, wishing you a fantastic balance of your day and week, and hopefully we'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody.